What's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of Missflips. In today's episode, we are making over these two amazing nightstands that I got off of Facebook Marketplace, and we are redesigning them for a client. So the first thing we're gonna do to these pieces is we're gonna start by removing all of the hardware from the drawers and then removing all of the metal details on the corners and sides. All right guys, let's get flipping. So after removing all of the details and getting all of the drawers removed, it was time to get started on repairing this damage on the bottom of both of the pieces. I don't know what happened to these guys, but they had horrible water damage and someone did not take good care of them. So I decided to try this technique that I saw on YouTube where you just spray a bunch of glue into the particle board and then press it shut with some clamps and wood and leave it overnight. But lo and behold, this did not work for me, so I ended up measuring the sides and going to Lowe's and picking up some wood to rebuild the sides. But before we get into construction, I just want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Northern Tool, for sending me this awesome hydraulic cart. It allows me to keep working no matter if someone else is home or not. I don't need anyone else to pick up a piece and move it around in my garage. I can also unload and load things into my car with ease without anyone else having to be home. The hydraulic table is perfect for getting pieces off of each other as well as getting things out of the car, and in this case, getting things stacked on top of each other. Make sure to check out the description below for the link to this awesome hydraulic cart by Northern Tools. Anyways, let's get back to flipping. Since I was going to be rebuilding the sides, there wasn't much that needed to be sanded, so I just sanded down the drawer dividers and then got to attaching the wood that I had them trimmed down at Lowe's. To attach the wood, I'm going to be drilling it into place, so I made sure that everything was lined up perfectly, and then I got a countersink drill bit that allowed me to screw in the screw beneath the wood surface. That way I could just fill it with wood filler and it would look like it was never even there. If you try this technique, I highly recommend double checking that you are screwing into the drawer dividers and not into the space where the drawer is going to go. Otherwise, your drawer is going to hit the screw and it's not going to slide in properly. To make sure that my wood was flush with the rest of the piece, I went in with my router and I used my flush trim router bit. This was honestly the funnest part. I had such a great time doing this. It was so satisfying to watch the router just clean everything, and I even used it for these little corner pieces right here, and it was flawless. Flawless. Highly recommend trying. Super fun. Cannot recommend it enough. Once everything was routed, it was time to go in with my sander and get off all of that factory finish off of the drawer fronts. That way I could stain them a nice natural color. Now at first I tried to see if I could fill in these gaps with wood filler, but I ended up going a different route that I'll show you guys in a little bit, but I ended up filling all of these holes with wood filler and it ended up working out so well. You could barely even tell that these holes were there after I painted. Once everything was filled and dried, I went in with a hand sanding block and just sanded everything smooth. Once everything was sanded, I had a lot of dust, so here is a pro tip. Sweep all of the dust up so that when you go to vacuum, you only have to vacuum one small area and then you're good to go. To prep the pieces for painting and staining, I made sure to go in with my vacuum and get the majority of the dust up, and then I wiped everything down with a tack cloth. For painting, I am going to be using a paint sprayer, so I went in with some scrap paper and made sure to block off all of the openings so that the inside of the piece didn't get sprayed. Something that's also really beneficial about having a hydraulic dolly is that you can use it as a table and as an extra workbench that rolls around wherever you need it. While that first coat was drying, I decided to go in and stain the drawers, so I taped off all of the sides of the drawers so that the stain wouldn't get messily on the sides. This staining process honestly was probably one of the most frustrating I have ever been a part of, because one of the drawers took to the stain much easier than the rest of them, and so they all ended up kind of being different colors. So I used a combination of a variety of different stains to match them all. After my first coat was dry, I went in and scuff sanded with a 200 grit, and the reason why you should do this is just to make sure that your next coat not only has better adhesion, but it allows for a smoother finish. Once everything was dried, I looked at the final result and I honestly wasn't happy with how the top of the piece turned out, so I went ahead and removed all of the paint that I had just put on, and I started out using a heat gun. However, that just wasn't working as well as I wanted it to, so for the other piece I moved on to a carbide scraper, and this worked much better. To make it look like the top was a seamless surface, I decided to go in and put some veneer over the top of it. So to prep for this, I went in with an 80 grit sandpaper and scuff sanded the whole thing and then cleaned it off thoroughly. Once everything was cleaned off, I went in with some spray glue and made sure that the entire surface had plenty of it, and then I sprayed the other side of the veneer, and then I made sure that all of the edges were lined up and worked quickly to make sure that the glue didn't dry out and that I could get all of the air bubbles out in time. After giving it the recommended amount of time to dry, I went in with an X-Acto knife just to clear off all of the trim edges. Now, I could have also used my router, but these pieces were already inside my garage and the router would have just created way too much dust. When going across the grain, I highly recommend going in a downward cutting motion. That way you don't break off any of the veneer. Once everything was cut and sanded, I went in with some touch-up paint just to get a little bit more of those edges. So because the veneer that I got was a different kind of wood than the rest of the piece, I knew that I was going to have to do some color matching also with the veneer. So I did a couple of just different tester colors and then compared them to the drawers and then found the perfect color that worked for me. So again, I used a combination of different kinds of stains just to get the right color. And here's just a quick example of what 3 color combinations can do. The top has the 3 colors and the trim does not. It just added so much definition and depth. Before putting the drawers into the pieces, I wanted to seal everything off, so I'm using an oil-based wax just to make sure that everything is sealed and luscious. I mean, look at this finish right here. It's so buttery and delicious. So originally when my client first reached out to me about a pair of nightstands, she wanted something like this. But if you know anything about me and my channel, you know that I don't do the same design twice, so I just use it as inspiration and something to go off of when creating the design for these pieces. For all these little detailed lines, I ended up having to do a total of 5 coats just to make sure that none of it was transparent at all. When using a small brush like this, it's really easy to get some transparency just because of the little amount of paint and the little amount of surface area that you're really working with the paintbrush. You know, sometimes I wish tape peeling could go more like this. But in reality, it's more like... Once all the painting was done, it was finally time to get onto the top coat, so I decided to try this tape thing that I saw on social media, and let me just tell you, don't try it. It doesn't work at all. I still had so much paint around the rim. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. If I am, let me know in the comments. When applying a top coat with a brush or a roller, lighting can be your best friend. If you get it at a certain angle, you can see exactly the places that you miss and then go and touch up those places. If you notice, in this particular shot and the shot beforehand, you can see a lot of bubbles and inconsistencies on the surface, lots of texture. So to get rid of that, you want to hold the roller really lightly. If you notice, I'm just holding it with a fingertips. I'm not putting any pressure on it. And you want to just roll over the surface with that, and that will pop all of the bubbles and get rid of any of the texture that you have. To give this green pattern a nice little pop, I decided that it would be really cool to go in with my signature style and put in some gold around that edge. Putting the gold onto a gloss finish was actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. It didn't stick as well as I expected, which, you know, gloss, yeah. Makes sense if you think about it, but I ended up having to go in with 2 coats of the gold paint just to compensate a little bit for the surface being so slick. Once the gold paint was given a night to cure, I went in for my second and final coat of finish. But anyways guys, we are coming to an end in this week's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and maybe learned a little, because I know I definitely did. Thank you so much for sticking around and for all of your support, and thanks again to today's sponsor, Northern Tools, for sponsoring this video. But until next time guys, stay flippin'!